You know, behind every sensitive, really personal conversation you might have in a counseling room, there's a record being made. But what if that record was way more than just a summary of what was said? Today, we're diving into a specific kind of note that's as much about theology as it is about memory. It's a totally natural thing to wonder about, isn't it? After you leave the room, what parts of your story get written down? What observations do they make? Well, we're going to pull back the curtain on that exact process, specifically within the world of biblical counseling.
And let me tell you, these are not just simple summaries. They are incredibly complex and carefully constructed documents. They have their own language, their own structure, and a very specific purpose that actually reveals an entire worldview in action. So, how do you bring order to the beautiful and, let's be honest, often chaotic nature of human stories? Well, many biblical counselors turn to a system you might not expect. It's a framework borrowed from the medical world, and it's designed to discipline memory and create clarity. It's called the SOAP framework. Think of it like a set of 4 buckets. Instead of just one long, rambling paragraph, the SOAP note forces the counselor to categorize all the information from a session. And the goal here isn't bureaucracy. It's about imposing a clear, logical structure onto a complex human narrative. Let's break this down real quick. S is for subjective. That's the counselee's story, in their own words. Simple enough. O is for objective. This is what the counselor can actually see and hear, and what they did in the session. A is for assessment. This is the counselor's pastoral take on what's going on, their understanding. And finally, P is the plan, the concrete homework and what happens next. It's simple, but it's really powerful. But why? Why go to all this trouble? This isn't just about good record keeping. At its absolute core, this meticulous documentation is seen as a ministry of stewardship. It's a way of carefully and responsibly handling the sacred trust of someone's story.
There's this one quote from the source material that just reframes the whole thing. To document well is to love well. Wow, think about that for a second. Suddenly, note-taking isn't some boring administrative chore. It's presented as an actual act of care, a way to love your neighbor well by being truthful, restrained, and ultimately useful. So this idea of stewardship really rests on 4 pillars. The note has to serve the person's actual care. It has to be truthful, but without sensationalizing things. No extra drama. It must be charitable, never ever degrading the person. And finally, it requires self-discipline from the writer. If a detail is juicy but not useful for care, it just doesn't belong in the note. And this all builds to what I think is the most fascinating part of this whole process. Biblical counseling documentation requires a highly intentional, super specific use of language. Here, word choice is absolutely everything. And here's the reason why that language is so critical. The number one danger they're trying to avoid is role confusion, making a ministry of soul care accidentally sound like a licensed clinical practice. The note has to be a truthful representation of the specific service being provided. Nothing more, nothing less. This creates the need for what is basically a translation guide. Counselors are trained to consciously choose words that align with their ministerial role, rather than just borrowing from the world of clinical psychotherapy. Just take a look at these examples. A patient becomes a counselee, client, or care seeker. A treatment plan becomes a care plan or a discipleship plan. There's no diagnosis. Instead, it's a presenting concern. And a therapeutic intervention is called a counselor response or scriptural guidance. You see, this isn't just semantics. It's a constant, deliberate act of maintaining role clarity. So if you're a counselor writing these notes, who is your actual audience? Well, it turns out you're writing for at least 3 potential readers at all times. And keeping them in mind is said to purify the language and keep the note incredibly faithful to what happened. So who are these 3 readers? They are the supervisor, who's overseeing the work, the counselee themselves, and potentially a court of law. And each one of them is going to read that note through a completely different lens, asking a different fundamental question. First up, the supervisor. They're looking for competence, theological soundness, and accountability. Their question is basically, does this note prove that good, responsible care is happening here?
Second, the counselee. And this is such a powerful check on the whole process. The note has to be so fair and so charitable that if the person themselves read it, they would feel seen and represented accurately, not turned into some kind of caricature.
And finally, the court. This reader demands sober, factual, just the facts language.
They're going to ask, does this note sound truthful, restrained, and relevant to the ministry that was provided? No room for sensationalism here.
Now, the stakes get even higher when a crisis enters the room. In those moments of serious risk, the source material is crystal clear. Vague documentation is dangerous. In fact, clarity becomes an act of safety.
For example, when suicidal thoughts are part of the conversation, a note can't just say suicidal ideation discussed. No way. It has to specify. Are the thoughts passive or active? Is there a plan, an intent, and means to carry it out? What protective factors are keeping the person safe? What exactly was the safety action the counselor took? And who was contacted for support? In these moments, every single detail matters. So, after all this, the structure, the specific language, the accountability, what does one of these notes actually represent? Well, it becomes far more than just a simple record of a conversation. Every single note is a theological artifact. It's a snapshot of an entire belief system. The words chosen, the details included, the structure that's followed, all of it reveals a deep set of values about God, about suffering, about change, and about what it truly means to care for another human soul.
And this really raises a question for all of us, far beyond any counseling room. Whether it's a performance review at work, a text message we send, or even just a private journal entry, what do the records we choose to keep, and the way we keep them, reveal about what we truly value?